Everyone's either lying or wrong. Because from news outlets to your local angry YouTuber, everybody wants to push this narrative that the movie industry is in this downward spiral, and this past Memorial Day weekend box office is the proof.
The worst Memorial Day weekend in decades, with the exception of 2020. Of course, theaters were closed then.
Now, I disagree. And actually, it's not even me disagreeing, it's the evidence not supporting their claims. Now, when you look at this year's Memorial Day weekend box office numbers, it's definitely disappointing. There's no argument about that. However, the reason that it's so bad is not the reason that everybody seems focused on. There are two major contributing factors to why this holiday weekend was so bad. One has to do with Furiosa, the movie itself specifically, and the other has to do with superhero movies as a genre. And some of you might be thinking, hey, we didn't have a superhero movie this weekend. What are you talking about? Give me just a little rope and follow me for a second. This Memorial Day weekend is simply a product of Hollywood failing to follow a trend that they set and we got accustomed to following. But first, let me quickly identify the established pattern, and then I can show you how this past weekend breaks that pattern. For years now, the Memorial Day movie weekend has gone the exact same way, and the top 5 movies of that weekend every year consist of the same 4 genres. There's always a comic book movie, there's always a sci-fi fantasy movie, there's always an action movie, and there's always a movie for the kids/family. Now, those are the specific genres that make up the top 5 grossing movies of the holiday weekend every single year. And that's not a big surprise because those are just the most popular genres in cinema, but those are always present in this weekend. You can't find all of them in every single weekend throughout the year, but in this weekend, all of them are present. But don't take my word for it. Let's look for a second. So last year, 2023, we had Guardians of the Galaxy 3 as our comic book movie. Little Mermaid was our fantasy, and it happened to also be a kids movie. But you had Super Mario Bros. As the clear kids movie, and Fast X was the action movie. Pre-pandemic 2019, we had, of course, Avengers Endgame functioning as our comic book movie. Disney's Aladdin was our fantasy movie, but it also functions as our family and kids movie. We also had Detective Pikachu, though, functioning as a kids movie and family movie as well. And you can keep going back year after year, and this holds true. Now, some years a movie is so big, it encapsulates more than one genre. Like 2018, Avengers Infinity War was our comic book movie, but it was also our big family movie as well. Those categories will always be represented this weekend. Going back as far back as 2016, we already established there's a comic book movie this weekend every year, but also that comic book movie never makes less than $20 million this weekend. It's not always this opening weekend. Sometimes it opened a few weeks prior, but it's in theaters and in the top 5 Memorial Day weekend, and it's going to make $20 million or more. So with this year not having a comic book movie, that's an automatic $20 million that we're just leaving up to chance. Now, that's the first contributing factor of this weekend, and an uncertain $20 million may not seem like a lot in the grand scheme of how much money we're dealing with these movies, but when you couple it with the second part, then you start to see the fuller picture. The other reason is concerning this movie right here, Furiosa. Because especially with no comic book movie in theaters this weekend, everybody was expecting Furiosa to take the top spot and dominate the weekend. And it did take the top spot, but also barely. Some are saying that people just aren't going to the movies as much. Ticket prices are high. It's more cumbersome to take a whole family to the theater. And so just not as many people are going. Now that makes a certain amount of sense. And that may be the case when you expand it to the entire year of movie going. But when you're talking about this weekend, that's not really the case. Because again, look back at previous years on this weekend at the box office. And let's just focus on the top 2 performing movies every year this weekend. The number 1 spot always makes $80 million or more. And then the number 2 spot is around that $30 million window. So that's a gap of about $50 million between the first movie and the second movie. Follow me, we getting there. But let's just check my work for a second. 2016, number 1 movie, $80 million. Number 2 movie, around $30 million. 2017, $80 million. Number 2 movie, around $30 million. Now in 2018, we actually go over $80 million and get to $100 million. And the number 2 movie is also over 30. It's around $53 million. But see how the gap between number 1 and number 2 still stays at around that $50 million spot. 2019, we're well over $100 million, and the number 2 spot right back down at that $30 million spot. So just last year, the number 1 spot is over $100 million. And where is that number 2 spot? Right around that $30 million spot, right where it's supposed to be. So that's a clear pattern, right? Cool. What about this year? The number 2 spot, Garfield, is right where we expect it to be, right at that $30 million spot. But oh wait, the number 1 spot is also around that $30 million spot. So where's this other $50 million? Well, let's try and find it. We got our sci-fi movie. We got our kids' family movie. We got our action movie. Oh, we're missing a superhero movie. And just like that, with the release of one movie, with just the release of a comic book movie, we have a standard Memorial Day weekend. Because it doesn't matter the quality of the movie. We already know that. Because just go back and look. 2016 was X-Men Apocalypse. This is considered to be the second worst X-Men movie, period, but it still follows the pattern. In 2017, Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is still in theaters after a month. It came out May 5th. And it's still in theaters, and it's in the number 2 spot, fulfilling that comic book movie spot. You conditioned a consumer base to expect a certain type of product, and you didn't provide it. And this isn't anybody's fault. They didn't have a comic book movie to drop because of the strikes pushed everything back. But because there wasn't anything in that slot, that's the only reason this weekend performed that bad, because all the other pieces were present and all the other pieces performed how history dictates they should have performed. But all this doom and gloom over a bad performing weekend isn't actually as warranted as it seems like it is when you actually look at the information that's available. That was a lot. And if you're still here, I appreciate you sticking to the end and suffering through my analytical rant. Now comes the important part. What do you think? What is your interpretation based on the information I gave and based on what you know about what's going on? What do you think the real reason is? Is this the sign of a downward spiral of Hollywood? Or is this just an anomaly because we didn't have all the pieces that we usually have? Curious to know how you guys see it, and I'm interested in having the dialogue and the debate so we can actually exchange these ideas, because it's a fascinating subject to me. So let me know what you think. We'll get into it, and I'll catch you guys next time.